There we go. Here we are. We're just doing a little game chat in this video. We were going to talk about last night's experience with Eclipse Phase. Well, it was meant to be a one-shot, but it's going to be a two-shot as we kind of left it off halfway through the mission. It was my first time running Eclipse Phase. I had never played Eclipse Phase, and I actually realized thinking about this morning that it's the first time I've ever run a game that I've never played or seen played before as well. So it was a bit of a branching out experience for myself. I've got two of the guys here that played in the game. I've got Chepe and Philip. So yeah, what do you guys? What stood out for you about Eclipse Phase?
I'll let Phil go first since he's the one who actually took notes.
Oh, I just took notes about subjects that we could discuss in the video. What stood out to me, perhaps the most, was the setting. It was the environment. It was the general vibe that permeates Eclipse Phase itself, which is this cyberpunk, space-age, low-gravity setting where everyone has neural implants, and it just has a really different vibe than a lot of the other fantasy-type games that I play. So I think that really stuck out to me. Also, how easily it became an adult game stuck out to me as well.
Yeah. The whole kind of backbone of the game is transhumanism, and it can lead to a lot of kind of adult questions and themes, I suppose, when you start to think about, what will people be like in this kind of a future. What about you, Chepe? What stood out to you?
So I'm actually a huge science fiction nerd. Like, my favorite game is Numenera, and I love games like Shock, or, let's see here, Stalker. Like, I love science fiction. It's like my favorite subject or genres, because it's multiple genres within it to get into, and so I really appreciate something that really tries to nail transhumanism. I saw how they left everything open to basically be whatever you want. How I would describe the setting, at least being someone coming from anime, I would describe it as Cowboy Bebop's meets Ghost in the Shell. Deals with questions of AI sentience, immortality, going from body to body, what your identity is, what your gender identity is, what's, all those kinds of things. And I love the fact that science fiction, the premise of the universe itself, creates a lot of social questions. As Philip said, it gets, adult really quickly, because when you have immortality and you have you have a world where gender doesn't really matter, where age doesn't really matter, where your body, your physical limitations, and ethnicity doesn't really matter. You can load up languages onto your own ego and onto your own mind. Even your own memories aren't technically sacred in this world. You're just a piece of information stuck inside of a shell that you can choose what shell that is. And so it's a really mature world that brings up a lot of cool, interesting social questions. I love the fact that they renamed the moon Luna. It was a nice touch. It's a little bit so open-ended that they don't really focus in on one thing. And I noticed that they wanted to leave the option of aliens open, so they just said aliens exist, but they didn't really quantify it. They didn't really clarify it. So if you wanted to write it off as a hoax or something, you probably could.
Mm-hmm.
They left Earth very open-ended, like the post-apocalyptic kind of landscape, but it's being shrouded. Everyone's forbidden to go there. It's so open-ended that it's hard to really be inspired for a particular focus. You don't really know what the game's geared for.
Sure.
It's an advantage and a disadvantage. So you can make it whatever you want to your group, is what I thought, but it doesn't really feel like it inspires a particular kind of play. Like Shadowrun is all about the operation, and it doesn't really do much else, right? That's what it's about, and it's kind of ironic because that's what the combat system feels like, is Shadowrun.
Mm-hmm.
So like some elements of the system feels like you should be operatives and others don't. And so the mechanics for me like mentally clash with what the setting's supposed to do.
Right.
Because everything is very risky. There's like 7, 8 steps to do something, like switching a morph or just taking an action in combat. And it feels like the mechanics don't really explore the themes in and of itself. Like the
Yeah.
mechanics are good enough if you mastered them to run the game, but it doesn't really feel like the mechanics interact with the themes of the world in any way.
Hmm. Yeah, they're really just kind of resolution mechanic, and like we kind of noticed yesterday when we were prepping for the game, it's actually a lot more of a complex resolution mechanic than what we've been used to in recent games. You know, recent games that I've played, lots of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, recently introduced me to Fate Accelerated and Fiasco. These are all very quick, easy, heavy narrative, I think, and descriptive games. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is, I suppose, what you make it, but it's very quick mechanics, you know. Simple systems, not too much looking up these different modifiers. There's not a lot of heavy math in any of those games. And with Eclipse Phase, like we noticed right away, looking at the combat, you know, there's a 4-step turn kind of resolution, and then there's an 8-step action resolution for each action that happens for each player within those turns. And so it's a bit intimidating. And it reminds me also of Shadowrun because I've recently just started playing Shadowrun. I just got the 5th edition book, and there's so much math and there's so many rules and so many different things that can happen that looking at that rule book is very intimidating to me. I just look at it and think, well, man, it's going to take me forever to learn how to do this. And with Eclipse Phase, we kind of just jumped in at the deep end. We grabbed the quick start rules and said, okay, we're going to play on this day, and we got together to play. It actually, once we actually started playing, it went a lot smoother than I thought it was going to. It simplified it a bit just to keep it moving. I didn't really take the time to learn how wounds and mental trauma and stuff work. I intend to have those figured out before we finish this mission next month. That's my goal, is to understand the combat mechanics and the mental, aspect of it as well for all of your traumas and your damage and stuff like that before the next session.
To be real honest with you, I think the mechanics here really get in the way of some of the themes that Chepe was touching on before about the philosophical implications that the world implies and how they're not directly related to the mechanics themselves. I say if you can streamline the system to have less mechanics that we have to engage in and more role-playing aspects like we did in the introduction, I think the game will go a lot smoother and you'll be able to delve into some more of the complex amoral societies, some of the corporations and intrigue, and just what it truly means to be this immortal being who's able to travel across time and space to go into a new body. And like, what's that about? Like, how do you react? What is it like to have body rejection or to go insane?
Yeah.
And for me, that's I'm personally more interested in that in the world. And obviously, as Chepe was saying, it's not really reflected in the mechanics that you use.
I mean, it's there, right? They have, you basically make what is the equivalent to 3 saving rolls every time you ego cast and switch a body.
Yeah, but that seems so arbitrary. Like, why?
It's supposed to simulate, I guess, like the dangers you have, so it's risky every single time, but it's such an unenjoyable process, is what it seems, because you have to make a roll. You're like, okay, now we got to see what happens to me. Okay, now we got to see what happens to me. Okay, now we got to see what happens to me. I don't.
Does it not remind you of playing in 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like you roll a crit, but let's confirm and see if it's really a crit if you actually do it. So it becomes a bit much for me there. I say 1 roll, you're in your body or you're not.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's still a lot for me to to learn, I suppose, with the system. And actually, thinking about it today in hindsight, and I actually started a conversation with some people on Eclipse Phase Facebook group as well, just to talk about what I felt about the combat and stuff like that, and to see, what they thought. And I understand, of course, like never played the game before, never saw the game played before, just jumped in and struggled maybe with the concept of the math at the beginning. But once we got playing, actually, it went pretty quickly. We didn't have a whole lot of combat anyway. There was one combat sequence only. And
I was a little confused about how combat worked from the eyes of my character that I was in, because I didn't know how far I could move. I didn't really understand how zero gravity worked in relationships to gunfire. So all this was like another dimension on my mind, trying to understand these effects.
right.
So did anyone else encounter that when you were in character playing?
Well, I've read a lot of I wikied whatever didn't quite mess, right? It's hard to imagine things, right? Because it's not like there really is a movement base. The
It loosely mentions it in the quick start rules. I don't know. I was just kind of free forming a lot of that as far as
it's
the
really
movement.
set up to do a plus 30 or minus 30 as just the general range, and it seems like everything's built off of those modifiers. And I think even someone in your thread that you posted on the Facebook group about combat rules mentioned that it's modifiers that really make the combat in depth. And I think that's what the system's kind of built for, if that makes any sense. But yeah, it's hard to visualize in your head, right? Because it doesn't really give you movement range, right, Phil?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it gives you actions, right? So in my mind, I guess the combat is more like, it's supposed to be more like a Blade Runner style thing, where it just shifts the camera over to the character, and it's about who shoots first and actions, rather than actually figuring out distance.
There was a book series that came out by Orson Scott Card. Do you guys know the name of the book series I'm talking about?
No.
Which book series are you referring to? I'm sure I would know it if
It's like the one. It's one of the books is called Speaker for the Dead. Another one is the Bean Chronicles, and it's all about this young boy. They just made a movie about it, and he goes up into outer space, and he has to do space training, and a lot of it is navigating through this type of arena where your body's able to move through space with zero gravity, and if there's nothing to stop you, then you just keep going, you know? So, can't remember the name of the book, but a lot of it had to deal with like how the character was able to navigate that environment, and him being able to manipulate it gave him the advantage over the other people who weren't used to being in it themselves. Which
Doesn't go ahead.
which Chepe's character would have been able to exploit, being the bouncer morph.
Well, I did that a bit when I tried to use my free fall skill to dodge roll through things. I added like a plus 10 because of my morph. But that was about it. I did that once during the play. I mentioned it. It still backfired. I ended up like critically failing and getting shot in the leg.
I remember that. I remember my character going through your blood and getting stripes on the face. Tell me more about how you felt about your character. Do you feel like you were any type of integration into your character, or you understood their motives and their desires? Or how did you feel about that, Chepe?
Well, that's actually probably one of the strongest parts about Eclipse Phase character sheet, is that because it gives, like, if you see the default character sheet, it has tons of categories of skills that you can just fill in. It says like interest or...
Yes, of course. I have one right here.
Yeah. And so when I looked at Amir's character sheet... Oh, what happened to Ian?
I think he's going to have to sign back in. His internet connection sometimes goes in and out.
Dang. Okay. I'll tell him we'll hold the fort.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, but Amir, because there were so many skills, and some of the skills are labeled interests, you actually have a exceedingly thorough idea of what kind of background this person has just from looking at what kinds of skills they have. because his interests include strange Muslim traditions, like obscure Muslim traditions. Like it was that specific. It mentioned obscure Muslim traditions. It showed me like 3 or 4 different languages he knew, including Spanish and Arabic. So it showed me what kind of ethnic background he kind of had. Showed security systems to reflect the fact that he's hired himself out as a bodyguard, and I tried to use that in play. It just didn't end up working out just because of where the terminals were. Tons of different things. So because the skills, which is one of the main advantages of percentile systems, because you can be so free form with skills, there's a lot of room to show the kind of life that a person has had just by what skills are listed.
So you base your characterization upon a numerical value on a skill list. I based
not the numerical value on the skill list.
Just
what
that,
skills
just that it
were
was
there. Yes, because
I
that informed me quite a bit about what he had to learn about.
I see. Like, what was his motivating interest to learn more? Okay. I base mine off of reading the character's description and role-playing tips.
I read that a bit, yeah. Like, it gave the reason why my character was a neuter.
Oh, he was a neuter in the game, like,
Yes.
specifically on the page. Wow.
Yes, he was a neuter, and it says...
I thought you came up with that on your own.
No. That was specifically mentioned. It says when you're role-playing Amir, he's a neuter because he thinks sex is a distraction. So he's a very clean-cut, very serious kind of person. At least that's what I saw, because he chose to have a body that couldn't have sex.
Clean cut? Was that a pun there?
Oh, no, but that's a really good pun. I wish I would have thought of accidental puns are the best.
All right, so I played my character. She was female, and I have not played a lot of female characters. But I kind of got this impression about the things that she does and what she tends to do, like infiltration. She has really high values in kinesthetic weapons. She's physically very strong, so she has to be very strong to do this type of climbing. So I tried to make her a very aggressive alpha female who was always trying to find some type of conflict, whether or not it was party related or in setting related. And that's what I tried to bring her into life, because she's a radical. She's a political dissident. She's
You did that very well,
she's
considering
an anarchist.
Guy, just
What's
because
that?
he definitely felt like an anarchist, because you just psychopathically just opted a guy because, yeah, like you did that. You nailed that perfectly. So you chose the right character, because that was definitely what came across.
Well, the thing is that performance came from reading the character sheet, trying to understand who the person is in my mind, and then to try to portray it. You guys had great voices, but I didn't really know what. Like, she has I guess a German accent, but my German was just. It would become comedic, and I didn't want her to come across as a comedic character. So
Trust me, that's why I avoid Irish accents, especially when I'm playing with Ian or Lloyd, because it's the most horrible thing.
But now, what I find to be very interesting is you mentioned before about the murder, and it's all to do with neotonic morphs.
Mm-hmm.
But the person that I actually jump into their body is a neotonic morph. And so I plan to have my character's reaction not to like neotonic morphs, and that this is punishment from Firewall because of what her previous actions were. What do you guys think about that? Is that good?
Yes,
Sure,
that sounds hilarious.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's Did you figure out the name of that book series you were talking about earlier? Sorry, I got cut out there for a bit. It was the Ender Saga.
Yes, it was Ender Saga.
Yeah. And
Ender's Game.
Yeah, that's the movie
Wait.
that you're talking about.
Oh no.
So xenomorphs. Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting if our characters came across something. What's fascinating to me is if you read any there's a religion that's close to Hinduism that's called Jainism.
I love Jainism, actually.
And
Jainism,
Jainism,
I've heard of
yeah,
Jainism.
you have two separate categories of beings in the world. And one is known as like Jenga, and then there's like Sepi Jenga or something like that. And one is for the living organic being, and then one is the material being. And what we're seeing is the rise of the material beings and the titans. And so you have the integration of the two subjects now with transhumanity.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the pull towards the inorganic and the organic, and they're trying to find a balance between life and death.
For role-playing purposes, that another cool thing about transhumanism, especially this transhumanism to the extreme, is seeing different religious individuals' interpretations of this phenomenon, because it's still 10 years after they've excommunicated, like, from Earth. So
Yes, yes,
people
yes.
with different religious backgrounds, seeing how they interpret how they interpret their worldview now, with the soul and their bodies being as expendable as they are. How do they confront different issues?
Yeah, I think that'd make for some very interesting role play. Perhaps someone's
it would have
lost
to be in the
faith,
right
gained
group.
faith, or
No, not even just a crisis of faith, just like the ability to just reinterpret things from their worldview. To me, that's interesting.
like a retroactive continuity of their faith by the
Yes.
events that followed. I understand. Okay. So what did you feel about Andrew's character? And I kind of felt she was Jamaican, but a techie.
Yes.
Yeah, she was. Well, she was just a scum techie, so she's like a space gypsy. And Andrew was actually typing in the chat, and I know you don't get the chat because you're using a mobile device.
That's right.
But in the chat, Andrew was typing. He was like, "Oh, I don't know what kind of accent to give my character. What should I go with?" I think it was you, Chepe, wasn't it, that said Jamaican, definitely Jamaican. And so he's like, "All right, yep, no problem." So that's where that came from. He just said, "Okay, I'm just gonna give her a Jamaican accent." So, which I have to say, his Jamaican accent was much better than his multiple different versions of the South African accent.
Yes.
That we played before.
Well,
there was a lot of accents in there, but none of them were South African.
in terms of game relevance and characters being able to affect the world, I felt that his character was the most advantageous to have.
Yeah, he got to do a lot of stuff with his hacking there on the arms dealer's ship.
I was just blown away by the conditions that he was able to subject them to. Being able to contact Firewall, being able to launch the ship. Just if he wasn't there, it would have been an entirely different story.
Any of you guys could have contacted Firewall at any time, just through your own mesh.
Oh, through the mesh.
Through the mesh.
Yeah, you could contact. And we didn't even touch on the idea of the muse, and I need to read up on the muse again. But everybody has a muse, and the muse is kind of like your own internal, like personal. It's like a personal data assistant or whatever. It can monitor your vitals, and it can tell you when you're like malnutrition. Like if you need to get more fiber, it can give you recommendations to what you need to.
I'm gonna RP the shit out of that.
Everyone has their own AI personality.
That's separate from their organic personality.
Yeah, it's it's the thing that's operating their morph with them.
I need to learn more of how it works. Is that attached to your ego then, your muse? Is it? Is it part of your ego? Because
it might be the part of the ego, as in it relates to the cortical stack that's inside their morph that their brain has been printed onto.
If it's part of your morph, then every time you change morphs, you'd lose it. So I'm not really sure. I need to study up more on that.
It could be both, actually. It could be open to interpretation.
Maybe. Yeah.
But if I remember correctly, because you can hack into someone's ego and rewire their memories. So it could be a part of the ego.
The entire reason why I took the cortical stack out of the guys whose brains we blew out is if he didn't have his cortical stack, then he couldn't remember that he was killed the way that he was.
Yeah, we blew his brains out now.
Yes, when I blew his brains out. Well, I think I rolled an 11.
Yeah, you did. You rolled like a critical hit, didn't you? So.
Yep. That is cool. I do love how they did that with critical successes.
Yep.
And with the percentile system. I also
Same
like
thing.
how there's less dice. That is one thing I don't like about Shadowrun. Of course,
The
that's
dice.
a personal, subjective thing. Some people prefer more dice and less math. I would prefer a little bit more math and a lot less dice.
I've only recently started playing Shadowrun, and there's a really useful dice roller online for it. It makes it very simple.
I can see that.
And I do have to say, my experience with Shadowrun has shown that the actual probability of it, it seems to be much more accurate based on your skills than like a D20 system. Whereas, like you roll a 20-sided die, there's a whole lot of swing. You could roll 1, you could roll 20. Whereas with the dice pool system in Shadowrun, you're always going to have any particular die you roll, you're always going to have a 1 in 3 chance of getting a success if you're going for the 5-6 success. And then the
Which
more
means
dice you
statistically,
have,
if
the
you
higher
throw
skill you
6
have.
dice.
Yeah, you have a much better chance of getting, of succeeding. So
Sorry.
there's a little bit less swing in the Shadowrun system. And referring to what we were saying earlier about the similarities between Shadowrun's kind of mechanics and ideas and Eclipse Phase, like I had noticed things that stuck out of my head were Moxie, it was like Edge and Shadowrun. There was something else in my mind too that was very the Mesh and the Matrix and all that, very similar concepts. But it turns out that the two guys who developed Eclipse Phase together, the creators, it's Rob Boyle and I can't think of the other guy's name. I think it's something Cross.
Adam?
I don't know his first name. Yeah, something Cross anyway. But they both worked on Shadowrun.
There were people who made Shadowrun also made Burning Wheel, so it's like Shadowrun just produced all these different games.
Yeah, so they had both worked on Shadowrun. One guy had worked on Shadowrun 3rd and 4th edition, and the other guy had just worked, I think, exclusively on Shadowrun 4th edition. But so they obviously have a tie into that system, and obviously they brought some of those ideas with them when they went and made their own game.
I love the fact that they had it named Moxie. They couldn't have picked a better word for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only other terms that I could think of that would encapsulate it nearly as well would have been like gusto or machismo.
Right.
What?
I said spunk.
Spunk. Just Moxie is perfect for that universe. If you want that's very space western almost. You got some Moxie.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game, and I think looking back on it today, I've decided that I'm actually more. That's what I'm looking for. I'm just more inspired now to learn it and to study it more and master it a bit more. Maybe just master it in general. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to definitely try. I'm going to read more of the books. I'm going to learn more of the systems, learn more of the rules. Because the vibe I was getting from a lot of the more level-headed people I talked to in that post on the Facebook group was that it's not so bad once you get used to the math of it, I guess. Once you get used to the system, like any system, the first time you play a system, obviously it's going to be a bit mind-boggling if it's different from another system that you've played. But if you at the same time, if you play it, you exercise it, you get better at it, and it becomes more intuitive. I think that this is a game where I would extremely benefit, and I haven't had one of these in 20 years, but I would really benefit from having a Game Master screen. I had all my charts and stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's. I'll send you the website, and they do have lots of stuff like that. Yeah. They have lots of charts that you can look at.
They also have space whales, sun whales.
Yeah, that would be very useful to have a GM screen, and I'd be able to look quickly for my combat and stuff like that. Now, having said that, going back to what you said earlier. Philip, sorry, I'm just going to mute your mic for a second there, just while you shuffle the papers. Back to what you said earlier about how you enjoyed the role play aspect of it a lot, and not when it got into the mechanic part, the combat stuff, it was a bit more slowed down. The narrative was slowed down because of going through all the math. I think this is obviously a pre-written scenario, so combat was meant to happen. But I think once I get more used to the system, I would imagine in future games a lot of the stuff would be more of a narrative storyline, more of a storyline, and not so much action all the time, rolling combat skills and things of that sort. Combat is meant to be fast and furious, really, in this system, from what I've talked to the other guys who played it a lot. Obviously, learning the math, it slows it down a bit. But once you have it going, you think about how quickly it goes. In a couple of rounds of combat, usually it's over. You wouldn't have very many long, drawn-out fights
I
in
think
Eclipse
that's
Phase.
because of how low health generally is.
And wound thresholds and everything else. So you got to
Critical
take a
successes
couple
as
of
well.
wounds. Yeah. And the way wounds work, actually, from what I can tell, and I was worried about trying to learn the complexities of the wound system, but from what I can tell, wounds just give you a -10 to all your rolls. And so if you've taken 2 or 3 wounds, you're at -20,
Including anything.
-30. Yeah, everything. So that might play in faster too, which means, yeah, combat ends a lot faster. You take a couple of wounds, you're at -20 on all your rolls, dodging, everything. So you're a lot more likely to be killed pretty quickly, I think, once
It
you're
feels
wounded.
like a firefight, if that makes any sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
like time has slowed down for a few moments,
Mm-hmm.
and then those few moments drag on, like in a movie, like after a firefight in the middle of a cop show. And
Yeah,
after the first few blows happen, someone dies, and then it snaps back and it ends.
yeah.
That's what it seems like it would be.
So, somebody
I
used the term bullet time in there and said, yeah, just think of the combat as like bullet time for a couple of rounds and then it's over. So,
I feel like this system really rewards premeditation.
yeah.
Like thinking about how you want to enter into a situation that's about to become very deadly is highly important. Like
And not go
understanding.
anarchist and try to blow everything up from the first suggestion when we go through an airlock.
Well, I believe my plan was a little bit better than going and just talking to the person. It was like infiltration, getting into the computer systems before entering into that, which all of that ended up being key stuff that we wanted to do anyway.
Yep.
It would have been great. Yeah, it's not a bad idea at all. The problem would
But
have been the execution because you were constantly being escorted by the guards and um, you weren't left to your own devices to sneak off on their ship. Now, maybe
yeah,
if you
but
had,
the thing is like pre-planning before we went onto the ship.
yeah.
Um, that's where it would have been better for us, and that's definitely something I'm going to take away from that last game to build on for future games.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I,
I go ahead.
I mean, I just think that I really like the idea that Gavin wants to pull to his strengths
Hmm.
and that he believes in his strengths because he doesn't know a lot about the party and what the party's able to do too. I feel like it was a lot about learning how to work as a cohesive unit and learning how to trust one another to achieve objectives.
Hmm.
It
So,
really seems like a specialization system because, like Lloyd's character, Gavin,
mhm.
like it was because of him that we got the meeting. Essentially, all of us were essentially useless up until the ship, and then once the ship got in, his character became pretty much useless because he didn't have
Oh
a lot of
yes. Well,
combat roles at
that's
all.
also the way that the pre-gens are built, my friend.
That's also true.
It's
Yeah,
because that might not have been the case had we made our own characters.
true, true.
I really wish, I don't know, I want to see how the morphs are to reskin or to augment.
They're actually really easy. There's a website I can send to you that will have all the pertinent information you'll need to know about reskinning your morphs, and it
Because
does all the stuff for you. And it'll also have a breakdown of what each little component of morph does versus like upgrades you can do to the morph body.
that would be a lot more handy, because apparently the rules, like just as they're written, are presented horribly, at least according to everyone that I saw on creating morphs. And it really
Yeah,
seems like you have to make an individual character sheet for each and every morph, which is sad because they even had a separate section for a morph on the default character sheet, but that didn't look like it was actually helpful at all.
I feel like the thing about going in with pre-gens with this game, okay, one thing, it makes it easy to go ahead and jump into play. But what it takes away from is when you create a character, you have to learn about what all these different skills do, how they're interrelated, and also what body modifications you have that relate to those skills and abilities and stat scores. So when you're creating a character and you're learning about the process, you're learning more about the game and how it functions and what it expects of you. So unfortunately, I feel like the pre-gens just don't relate
Kind of took
that
that away,
information
yeah.
to you. Yeah.
I'm wondering how much that actually teaches you about the setting, like the
I think
actual
it teaches-
character creation process.
I think it teaches you a lot because you have to go into the book, you have to read about what this certain thing does, or like the website I was telling you about, it has a breakdown of each information from the book that you can read while you're trying to select what you want.
So this definitely seems like a game that requires heavy preparation on everyone's part.
It's a commitment, yes.
Yeah.
That's what it really seems like. It seems like it really rewards preparation for everyone. You can get the thing that you want. As I said, it's like a very, very overdone GURPS. You can get the thing that you want. You just have everyone needs to have a certain degree of mastery of the system.
Right, and even body integration, there are certain characteristics that you can have done to either your ego or to your morph or to the people who have your morph that's going to help integration. Or praxis, I don't even know what they call it.
Re-sleeving?
Yeah.
Free sleeving, yes.
Sleeving. I love that metaphor. I love the little terms for everything. I just Also sun whales. I can't get over sun whales. Like the setting is so serious, and then there's like these little things that just they put there for just to leave the possibility for that style of play, and it just breaks the fourth wall for me. Like sun whales. Even if you could genetically enhance whales to survive a vacuum, you're still a whale.
Well, I always thought that was an homage to Star Trek, where they had an episode where they had a whale that was which was an alien life form, but just traveled the cosmos without a need for anyone to be on it. It's just like this animal that went around.
I haven't even seen the sun whales in Eclipse Phase yet, so yeah, I don't know.
Yep, sun whales.
Also, I like the idea of playing an animal that's been upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Seems.
also.
Go ahead.
Good.
I just think it'd be really interesting to try to put your head in the mind space of an animal that has then been upgraded into sentience. Like
I don't see why that would be there. I understand having bodies. That makes perfect sense. People realistically would do that if given the opportunity, because that's why furries exist. People have self-identities as animals, and also people would just get bored of normal hominid bodies. It just kind of makes sense. If transhumanity had the opportunity, they would have animal bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But uplifting animals doesn't really make that much sense to me from
say, I like it.
a biology perspective. I know it's fun. I'm just saying it doesn't.
They don't have elves, and they don't.
They
have
have
dwarves,
bodies with elf ears.
Well, they don't have Ithilians, so they now have octopi. They're really cool. 8 hands to shoot 8 guns.
Yeah, one of the books has a picture of, it looks like some kind of a ring fight between an uplifted octopus and an uplifted gorilla. This octopus has got like a laser whip in one hand and a big staff in another. Well, I don't know if you'd call it a hand, a tentacle. Yeah.
And I kind of like the imagery of it swimming through zero gravity with the tentacles.
Mm-hmm.
And like coiling around things and pulling itself and grabbing other characters.
It would have a really hard time in zero gravity, I would imagine.
Because they have the air jets.
But there's not really material to shoot through. They have to squish out water with pressure in order to move. I mean, they could grip along the walls.
Pressure.
But I can't see them like free falling through zero gravity because they have nothing to swoosh. Air isn't dense. They can't it's kind of hard to swim through effectively.
Maybe they would do better in low gravity rather than zero gravity.
Yeah, like high
gravity. They would be
I guess
boss.
the air didn't have a high viscosity.
No, it doesn't.
Well, anyway, I kind of like the imagery.
Yes.
Or a cuttlefish.
Take your science out of my.
Sorry.
Get your science out of my science fiction.
I know, right? Imagine that. Weird.
Yeah. So we're gonna.
Well, I wish I could play an insect
I know, I'm surprised. Why don't they have
because
insect morphs?
Well, you're gonna be a spider
insects.
morph in the next
Well,
session.
I'm a spider
Not
tank,
oh, Amir is,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's not a real spider, but
which that's definitely that's got to be a reference to Ghost in the Shell. I don't see how that's not Tachikomas.
it'd be interesting to see. You guys are gonna be in Elysium, which is I think the largest city on Mars. So.
I'm a spider tank. Spider tank. Spider tank. I can do anything Spider tank can. I wonder if I can climb walls. I didn't look at that.
Don't know. Have to
I think
find
I'm
out.
just heavy artillery.
Are you? Leica could climb walls. You can't climb walls.
I don't think so.
Oh man, she's gonna be so pissed she's in this body. She's gonna be fucking livid.
Yeah. Your what was that? A ghost morph you were in before? It's gone.
Yeah, that was awesome. I loved it. I loved like how I played it like a predator type of
Mm-hmm.
a suit that would just kind of blend as soon as she walked.
That is another cool
She
aspect
was cool. She was tough.
for psychology. People acting differently when they're in different morphs. Like they take on the identity like normal role players. You have like a meta role
Well,
playing going on.
well, the thing is I think in psychology, a lot of the way that your personality is supposedly created, at least in 40 in theory, is about how your body mechanics works and informs your psyche. So
It would
I
it
can
would
see
be
that.
like someone who's really insecure and ego cast for the first time, like was really frail and brittle, like one of the purists, ends up being forced into a body that's super powerful. Like how would they handle that? How would they, or someone who's like an extreme pacifist and then put in one of those spider tanks for the first time? They're like, I can't do anything without hurting people, and they're like paranoid about using their strength or even touching anything.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be so interesting.
Yeah, but I
See,
think
there's
you
so
would
many
have to
cool
be a
questions.
very good oriented character to be like that. Like the entire idea of an invalid then getting a body that they can use, something that was talked about in the movie Avatar.
Hmm.
Like that's kind of an interesting concept too. Like going from having no legs to having a fully functioning,
You can,
jumping 50 feet to the air type
if
of
you
body.
have the money,
It's like,
you can't be an invalid. This is literally a setting in which you're an amputee by choice. Now that
Yeah.
would be interesting as well.
Yep.
Someone who chooses to restrict their arm.
like someone who's just interested in like getting experiences of different types of bodies, different, they're
Yep.
like a sensation collector. They care most about their memories, and they're just trying to draw upon like all these different forms, and like they're connoisseurs of sensation.
They're crap. Oh, I hate myself so much for not remembering. It starts with an E. Starts with an E. Ancient Greeks. What am I thinking of? Philosophy. It's the Epicureans.
No.
You're Epicureans.
Like that's a classic misconceptions of what
No, they're
Epicureans
not hedonists.
are.
They just want long-lasting pleasure, right? They want to do what has the most long-lasting pleasure.
Whoa, it's yeah, but it's all calculated. Like
Yes, I know. That's
their
what I'm
ethics
saying.
is based upon that kind.
They're like
So
you
you could have like
don't
an
just get
ancient Greek
wasted
perspective.
because it depends on how you evaluate. You don't just get wasted because then that's painful overall. You want the thing that gives you the most pleasure overall, which is why enjoying a fine wine once in a while might be the best. Like an Epicurean can evaluate things either way.
Like I kind of like where you're coming from here. Like have different philosophical perspectives on different types of morphs in the game. Like you can have
Or
ancient Greek perspective, German idealistic perspective, existentialist perspective,
I mean, or just a
all
thrill
for the
seeker, like
characters.
body thrill seekers. And you know, people who have fetishes are going to go crazy over that potential. I.e.,
Those existential
last dance.
dilemmas exist in a world where you're immortal.
Do existential, because you can be anything, quite literally. If you have a fetish, you can literally live out your fetish any way you want.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Or it
looks
could be
really
like
matter
Platonian
anymore now that they're a
psychoanalytic.
matter of money? Yeah. Do looks really matter
Yeah, I
anymore
like
now
it.
that it's a matter of money? Are they really that special? Do we really value that anymore? Does
It's a
people...
matter of like sensatory like manipulation or like pheromones and like symmetry and how
Or just programming.
everything's
What if
crafted. Like what is an authentic body-driven experience in this world? Our
there is one?
bodies just tools now, and what does it mean? Like, what is beauty in this world? I don't know. It's fucking
I'm
crazy.
surprised we didn't do any VR, because that's also another possibility in this world. I think
Yeah.
DBJ had a video on that.
Like an infomorph?
Yeah, not just infomorphs, or just being
Infomorphs.
addicted to non-reality, to VR, to get out of your situation.
That would definitely. I think the stuff that we're talking about is more relatable to a campaign than like a
Yeah.
one-shot
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
It's
Like I
definitely
said,
things to be
this
interested
doesn't
in.
really feel like a one-shot game at all. It doesn't seem like you can really, because of how the combat is and just how it doesn't really like you can really get much out of it with little investment. It really seems like you need a steady group to really
Yeah.
plan out things, because it rewards preparation, both for the campaign, for your character, and for any given situation. Like you said, you have to plan what you're doing when you go into it for an operation.
And to be real honest with you, I've learned from doing multiple one-shots, the more integrated I become with the character that I'm portraying, the more fun that I have role-playing the character, the more fun I have in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So for all systems, having that kind of background is just good. It's just at least I find it to be good as the type of playing style that I like to do, the type of immersion that I like. But it doesn't have to be that way for everyone.
Do you personally prefer in-character immersion, or
I
do you
do.
prefer? Okay, because that was an interesting subject for me, because everyone was talking about immersion for a long time, and then there's only like one other person who agrees with me. I was arguing about different kinds of immersion.
Oh no, there's definitely different styles and types of immersion. There's like first person, first character, eyes only type of immersion. There's like third person, God view immersion in the world. I think there's definitely different types and styles of immersion. Or it's not necessarily an on and off for immersion, but there's more of a spectrum, like a dial that you turn on the lights for a dimmer.
Mm-hmm. Like when most people talk about immersion, they're talking about pretending that there's someone else.
Mm-hmm.
At least within the one-shot group, with the main man kind of immersive style. What I always thought immersive was tricking yourself into being in a different world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like slight difference in goals. Like a lot of people focus on tricking themselves into pretending to be another person, where the connection that I was looking at was feeling like I'm living in another place in another time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I totally get that. Yeah.
That's a little
I think there's another type of immersion too, where
there's
instead
several.
of having a integrated background, you can just have personality traits that are your go-tos, like the way that you relate to the world. So it's just like a shortcut towards complete like a psychological understanding of the character.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just have these things that you do, and that's the way that you interact. That's your type of interaction. I don't know.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just gonna say we're gonna resume. We'll wrap up this mission anyway on our next session when we play again. Again, just trying to kind of lock down the mechanics a bit more, the setting and stuff like that. Which, once I've got a little bit more of a mastery of the mechanics, it'll be a lot easier, I think, then to run something like a campaign in future where, I don't have to worry about how does this work, how does that work. We can just actually tell a story and create some characters and go through and, really, really role play in this universe, I guess. Almost called it a world, but it's more of a
Like the group dynamic for me, I thought it was a really excellent group of people. Not only am I interested about learning about the world, I'm also interested about the players and their players' takes on their characters and learning more about how these people are going to develop under like Chepe's hands, under Andrew's hands, under Lloyd's, and see how they're going to evolve and become what stories do they have to tell about them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in that too.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens after that next session. We'll wrap up that particular pre-gen mission, and then we'll talk about what we want to do in future with the game. If we want to continue using those characters, or would you guys rather make up your own characters where you could get more kind of? I would imagine everybody would kind of probably prefer making their own character so they could have a bit more input on it and who they are and where they're coming from. You know, Philip has presented that really good program that's supposed to help for generating characters and also for switching around for different morphs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you visited that page, but I posted it through I think the initial message that you had about Eclipse Phase.
Yeah, I looked at it, but I was on my phone, so I couldn't really do a whole lot with it.
I don't see it. What's that?
Like character creation is based upon like you have a certain numerical value that you're able to spend for different aspects of your character.
Yep. So it's basically good
and
for mutants.
Depending on like that. Oh, I've never played those games, so I'm not able to relate to you if that is a true parallel.
Go ahead.
But so you just have these units that you pay for with everything, and the thing is that this game strongly stresses a non-materialistic aspect when it comes to character creation. Anything that you have in a morph can be lost. So I think the big thing to mostly focus in on is your ego. And like the kind of characteristics that your ego has versus like morph identity.
Oh yeah,
no, don't get too attached to material things in this world.
No. I mean, like the body is just a shell. You know, everything is about the ego ultimately. I think in Eclipse Phase,
which is also expendable.
Yeah.
Because your memories are expendable.
Unless you back them up.
Even then they're expendable because you lost a part of your life. You did something that you don't know you did. Are you really yourself anymore since you're just a copy of yourself?
But no, not only are you a copy, but you're a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
It's not even your human brain anymore. It's just a scan of a human brain, digitized, and then put in like software into a hardware of the cortical stack.
And we haven't even gotten
into There's got to be a diminishing returns on that somewhere. Sorry, go ahead, Lloyd.
No, I was just say we haven't even gotten into the idea of what's it called, forking, basically.
Yeah.
Where you can cast your ego into multiple morphs at the same time, so that there's multiple copies of you existing at the same time. And
but are you able to see from both sets of eyes at the same time? Like, is there a central controller and different aspects?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Each becomes an individual.
All I'm saying is I'm a spider tank.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. And I want to be a ship. And Phil will be an octopus. In me. Inside of me. You'll be the octopus inside of me, Phil.
Oh my.
Well, what I really like is that like the entire idea of the player becoming the character is like mirrored in the game of having the character jump and re-sleeve into these bodies. Because it's kind of an interesting thing of what you do when you create a character. You're jumping into the character and then you're portraying it.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, philosophically, I'm like, whoa, how can we view philosophy like this? Oh, I don't know. I like it.
There's some people with identity disorders that jump from identity to identity in a similar way. Like a belief system for them is like a sleeve that they put on.
Right.
And so a person like that in this world would be even more interesting because it's even more fucked up for them.
Like, I think there's an Arthurian legend about King Arthur's father taking on the image of another person to sleep with the other king's wife. And so you kind of have this aspect of taking on other personas, becoming other beings, casting into them in mythology.
Yes.
So I don't think it's necessarily a new idea.
I know it's not a new idea. I meant just someone with that kind of identity disorder would be a fun character to... Maybe a good NPC, maybe not a good player character, because they would be pretty chaotic, I would imagine, because they would switch.
Yeah, it would be like Sybil, right?
Forking for people with multiple personalities. Schizophrenia, like multiple personalities doesn't exist anymore because you could just fork one personality into one body and then into another body. And so now they're complete. They're their whole thing again.
Exactly.
What are the dangers involved in that,
No,
if there are any?
I think isn't there like a plague that's going around too that you can get and you can contract like telekinesis?
I don't know.
You contract
That happens in
telekinesis?
game.
That sounds
Yes,
interesting.
you do. It's a virus. It happens from uploading like improper upload. Yeah, and just one of
Again,
the things that
psychic
happens.
abilities is a little weird. I think they just kind of had it in there just because they knew some people would want it. It's the same with like some of the animals. You just knew some people would want it, and it's just like you had tones of realism.
I don't know.
and-
I think it's pretty integrated into the setting. So I'm not so sure about how that would work. I think that's definitely one perspective on it. But I just don't
Numenera
know
gets
about
away
the.
with it, but
Yeah.
I can't imagine Eclipse Phase doing it.
I'm really interested to learn more about Numenera here. I was looking at it while I was at work because I had nothing to do.
I'll try to do videos. If you watch the Gentleman Gamer's review of it, that's probably one of the better introductions to the setting. I can
Yeah.
also send you a link to. They released the first chapter of the book, which is a short story that introduces the world. Even at the Kickstarter, they released it free. It's a free PDF that you can read. The first chapter, it's the short story that is in the book itself to introduce the world. It's great. That and the Gentleman Gamer's review will probably introduce you better than I would.
There's like a wiki online. I think it's called the Nth World, and I went on there reading stuff, and it was really interesting. I think the way that they said to build a glaive was kind of the way I went ahead and built my glaive to begin with. So I was kind of happy about that.
Looking forward to that. So, I think, yeah, will I wrap this up? We don't have much more to say at the moment about Eclipse Phase.
How do you feel as a GM in terms of prep? Like, how do you feel how much prep you would have to do for a game?
I don't know. I'm still a little bit kind of mind blown. But I think, like, obviously, I was in way over my head for this. But, fortunately, I had the pre-generated kind of mission to fall back on. I don't know. I really need to get a better handle on the mechanics. I need some kind of a screen with a quick reference to all my charts so I don't have to flip through pages and stuff to try to find it on a PDF. It's also probably be a lot easier to do with an actual book rather than a PDF on a tablet.
Oh yes, my God, most games are.
Yeah. So I'm working on that, but I'm excited about all the prospective stories and the opportunities, you know what I mean, within the universe and the game that we'll be able to explore. So,
but I wanted to ask, would you prefer using the system they have for this world, or would you prefer using another system like Fate to run it?
I'm not 100% sure about. I'm interested in checking out the Fate. I know that there is a Fate conversion in the works. It's in like beta testing phase, and some people are involved in. Some people, I've heard different things. Well, mostly everything I've heard about that is that it doesn't work for one reason or another. I don't know why that would be. It might be fun for us just to try to run something like that using Fate or Fate Accelerated, just to see how it plays out.
I've been wanting to include transhumanism in one of these genre mixes.
No, we should definitely try it out. But I pretty much, I definitely, at this stage, I feel a need to learn more about this system and try and get it worked out. I do hear that the transhuman, it's like a player's guide for Eclipse Phase, is supposed to be really good. It's supposed to have a much better setup in it for character creation.
Do they have templates?
I don't know.
Yeah, they do.
Sure.
For character creation? Yes.
Yes, because that's what really helps GURPS is the fact that it has templates and why it...
Yeah.
I was really wondering if they had character packages.
There's a lot of books.
They do.
And they're all available free, which is nice. in
I
PDF
believe the
forms.
website that I'll send you the link to not only has like character creation like templates, but also when it helps you to fill in those templates, it'll allow you to upload your character's image to that template.
Okay.
If
I'm
that'd be
going
something you'd be
to.
interested in.
I know we don't need more groups on Facebook. What I'm thinking about doing is setting up just like a private kind of hidden group just for us for Eclipse Phase, and that way we can kind of collect all of our online resources in one place. And rather than trying to cycle
Right
through
on.
this comment thread or that comment thread, we can just have there, okay, Philip posted right there. There's that character generator, that Excel sheet thing. We can have a link to where all the books are. We can have links to anything that kind of helps with,
I love how Andrew was the least prepared of any of us and became the MVP.
Oh yeah.
He didn't even know his character's accent. He didn't read the rules at all. He just went in and he kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah. Being a techie came in real handy. It's a bit like if you're playing Shadowrun and you're the decker, which strangely a lot of people don't seem to want to ever play deckers in Shadowrun because it's like a whole little mini game within the game. But I've been playing a decker in Shadowrun. It's the only character I've ever played and having a blast with it. And a lot of times you do end up being the MVP because you're the person who can hack into the system, get this information, shut down this system, everything else. So
That is one thing. You wouldn't think it would have to be that way in a transhumanist universe because you'd think there would be alternatives. I'm not sure how much the makers actually read into biotechnology and how they fuse, like, what alternatives there are to computers, because it didn't really seem like they... I don't know, it seemed like there was a huge focus off of computerization. You know what I mean? Like AIs and the typical ways, when a civilization that advanced would have also had several alternatives, like organic alternatives. Like something like that would definitely have already used DNA to store computer information, which is a more efficient way of doing it. Other than outside of a cortical stack, I don't see why they wouldn't have that. Like, it just, I don't know. Does that make sense? Or am I just rambling on about something that
kind
makes
of.
no
Yeah,
sense?
it's a pretty heavy material, but yeah.
If you've ever read anything like about DNA origami
I
or...
really haven't.
Okay.
I was never very good at science when I was a kid growing up. I was always interested in, I was decent in mathematics, and I was always interested in like literature and writing and those kind of arts, but science just, yeah, I was always sleeping in science class.
It really seems the genetics end on the transhumanism universe seems to be a lot weaker than the cyberpunkish technology augmentation end.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed. Of course, that's just me, because, I nitpick things.
About biology.
About biology, yes. Which is why this universe, Phil, that I was mentioning, has no mythological references, because it was literally built from scratch. And that's why you can't play a fawn. I'll make a setting video about that as well, so maybe that will have a clear conveying idea of it.
Cool. Well, I think that'll wrap up our chat about Eclipse Phase.
All right, sounds good.
So thanks for joining me, guys, and sharing your thoughts on the game. We'll do it again in about 4 weeks, and
All right.
see how it goes then. Thank you, anybody who has watched this video. If you know anything about Eclipse Phase, if you have any information or any resources you want to share, please feel free to drop some comments down below. Yeah.
Marmalade.
Marmalade.